Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025 at 2:07 in the afternoon. So we're back from a real short break, but we're here now to have an introduction to our captive insurance industry, and a lot of new members. I think we've heard a little bit from Commissioner Bicklestone about captives, but really high level. And we're happy today to have the head of the Vermont captive insurance industry here speak with us. We also have people that are captives. So we're happy to have you here. Very important industry for the state of Vermont. And Kevin, I'll let you take it away. But before you do that, I'll ask my committee to introduce themselves. We have many new members this year, and good for you to know who is who.
Absolutely. I'm Jonathan Cooper. I'm in Southwestern Vermont, representing Pownell, Searsburg, Stanford, Woodford, and Reedsboro. I work in Bennington and St. Paul District Insurance.
Right on cue.
You're up.
I'm Lynn Harris Duncan, representing the Deerfield Valley, Wilmington, Whitingham, and Halifax.
Herb Olson, representing Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton, Starkville.
Abby Duke, representing both an urban and agricultural part of Burlington. Hi, Katie Grannon.
There's been so many descriptions of her district. Amazing. You wouldn't think it was in a district that diverse.
Katie Grannon, representing Jericho and I'm the vice chair of the committee.
Mike Markoff from Coventry. I represent Coventry, Irisburg, Newport Town, Troy, Jay, Westfield, Lowell, and Eden, and I'm chair of the committee.
Kirk White, I represent Bethel, Rochester, Stockbridge, and Hancock, and I'm the ranking member.
Monique Priestley, Bradford, Fairleigh, West Fairleigh.
Michael Booton, Berry City.
Tony Miklas, representing most of Milton and a little bit of Georgia.
Dave Bosch, representing Wallingford, Clarendon, West Rutland, and the bulk of Rutland Town.
Great.
And Grace, representing myself.
Our committee assistant, the most
Representing the
important.
committee.
Keeps us running and functioning.
Great. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kevin Mead, resident of Newport City. And despite the accent, yes, a resident of Newport City. For my day job, I am the CEO of the Vermont Captive Insurance Association. And the legislation that enables captive insurance in Vermont is 44 years old this year. And the VCIA, the association, is 40 years old this year. So we're celebrating that anniversary all year long. And each year we come before this committee at the invitation of your chair. And this year you're going to be hearing from myself. And then you're going to be hearing from a board member of the VCIA whose captive is registered here in Vermont, one of nearly 700 registered here in Vermont. So when you hear from her, just multiply by 700 and you get an idea of what we're about. And then you'll also be hearing from my colleagues, Sandy Bigglestone from the Department of Financial Regulation and Brittany Nevins from the Department of Economic Development, as we frame for you the captive industry, its reach, and what it's doing here in Vermont. So first of all, you get sort of Kevin's explanation of what a captive is. And this might be at variance to what you've heard before, because I tend to assume that I'm talking to my dog. And that is kind of a good way of sort of like making things understandable to me. So every time a business puts assets to work for the business, they're encountering a risk. If they're a trucking company, they put a truck on the road to go deliver materials there's a risk that truck could get in an accident, that truck could break down and need work being done. There's all kinds of risks surrounding that. And obviously, you've got effectively a couple of different ways of financing risk. You can assume that risk yourself. So when the truck gets in an accident, you fix it. And that's how you financed it. You paid for it. Alternatively, you can cede that risk to an insurance company and say, okay, my truck hit a wall. You guys now pay for it within the policy limits that I paid for. So you've effectively financed that risk by paying a premium to reduce your cost should the accident actually occur. But now I want you to imagine you've got 1,000 trucks, and those trucks are located all over the country. And as you start to shop around for a commercial product, you might find that either it's unavailable, or that it's very expensive, or the conditions imposed upon you for that policy are onerous to you as a business owner. And one of the options for you is to say, well, I still want to be insured. But what I'm going to do is I am going to establish an insurance company that I wholly own. And that's going to be my captive insurance company because I own it. And I'm going to pay my premiums to that captive insurance company. And that captive insurance company will then pay the claims as and when my trucks hit brick walls, et cetera, et cetera. And so at its basic level, that's what, in that instance, captive insurance is doing. It's a wholly owned entity of the parent company established as an insurance company to receive premium and pay claims. And Vermont is the global leader in that. Nearly 700, as I mentioned, of those captive insurance companies. And by global leader, the two entities that we overtook a number of years ago, now 2 or 3 years ago, were Bermuda and the Cayman Islands. And there are 40 other jurisdictions within the US that enable the writing of captive insurance, plus those overseas jurisdictions, and we are still the number one globally. And to give you an idea of what that means, think about some of the areas in which these captives operate. The genesis of this for many was the medical malpractice crisis of 40 years ago, where doctors, doctor groups, hospitals were unable to get medical malpractice. Those of you as old as me might remember it was particularly pronounced in the OBGYN space, that there was an inability for those doctors and practices to obtain coverage. And so captive insurance was a solution for them to enable them to continue practicing with coverage. But also dropping it down to a more minor level, I notice many of you have your cell phones. Some of you might have chosen to finance the risk that that's $1,000 piece of kit. And when your daughter puts oatmeal on it, that's $1,000 out the door. Or you can pay that $5.95 premium a month to the company that will then pay you when the oatmeal accident occurs to your handset. That company may well be using a captive to receive those premiums and then pay out the claims when the oatmeal incident occurs. So it runs the gamut of everything that you could think might be an insurable risk. And hands up who thought oatmeal was an insurable risk, because lo and behold, at least according to me, it is. So that it's a wide variety of insurance that runs through captives. And as I said, 700 here in Vermont. And the joke is when you've seen one captive, you've seen one captive, because they are all addressing their own unique risks in the organization. So within the VCIA, we have those captives as our members. You'll be hearing from the owner of one of those, Melinda, in a moment. We also have as our members the service providers. So those are the folks that provide captive management services, actuarial services, legal, banking services to those captives, because they're an insurance company and they need those services. Also, if you're a widget manufacturer and you're putting your warranty for widgets into a captive, you don't know how to pay a claim. You know how to manufacture widgets. So you might hire a claims specialist to pay those claims out. So there's a vast infrastructure that exists around the captive industry that is not just the captive themselves. And many of those entities are either based here in Vermont or have a Vermont presence, again, to support that huge installed base that we have of captives. We at the VCIA, we have a dominant position, just like Vermont's dominant position in captive insurance, we have a dominant position in the association world. And so we are now entering into a 3 to 5 year strategic plan to build on that dominance by enhancing our efforts in education so that we have the best educated captive owners and captive support infrastructure out there. Member engagement so that our members are learning from each other as well as everything flowing up and down from the centre. And lastly, what we're doing here today, advocacy, making sure that the playing field under which Vermont captives operate, thanks to the work of this committee and your predecessors on this committee, is the world-class legislation and regulation that those owners need in order to be assured that their insurance company is being adequately handled. And so what that means is that I also, having talked about how great we are, now have to come in with some of the less good news. The less good news is we face massive competition. Not only those 40 onshore domiciles, but also all of those offshore domiciles as well. Risk is a global business. And it is globally based companies that are bringing their risk to Vermont. Often they're US based risk, but sometimes they're global risk, bringing it to Vermont. So they need to have an assurance as to the professionalism that they're getting. And they have that, which is why they come. However, and I know you deal with it everywhere, we have a workforce issue. We need more qualified people in order to be able to support that industry in Vermont. We need to be able to retain young people to work in this industry. We're not unusual. We actually invited the head of the Vermont Society of CPAs to come to our legislative day today because the CPA community faces exactly the same workforce issues as we face. And then from a VCIA point of view, we have an infrastructure problem. And by infrastructure, I don't mean bridges, tunnels, roads. By infrastructure, I mean that every year we bring over 1,000 people to Vermont for our annual conference. This year in July, I had people calling me up saying, the best they can do for me is fly me to Albany and give me a rental car. There are no more airline seats into Burlington. Last year, we used 7 different hotels. I joke that for 3 days in August, we run a bus company bigger than Green Mountain Transit. I can guarantee you that if you count our passenger numbers for those 3 days in August, we're bigger than Green Mountain Transit because we're moving 1,000 people a day, twice a day, all around Burlington. We have an issue with infrastructure supporting our conference, and I'll come to that in a moment. Because normally, and Mr. Chairman, I believe this is my 3rd appearance in terms of me, but for a number of years, predecessors of mine have been here. And normally you guys are really pleased to see us because we bring in premium tax dollars that then flow into the general fund. And we've got an incredibly successful industry, meaning that those numbers are stable or increasing year on year. But now I'm coming in here asking you guys for favors. So the first thing I need you to do is to really address the resourcing of the DFR. DFR has the brightest people in captive regulation in the world. The phone rings. Sometimes it's from Vermont people wanting to address issues about their Vermont captive. A lot of times it's from people calling up from the state of, and I'll use East Dakota, since that's not a real state. It's people calling up from East Dakota going, hey, Vermont DFR, we've got this problem with this captive we regulate. How would you do it? We have the world's best people. My concern is that the systems behind the world's best people might be lacking. And so industry says to me, can you ensure that the DFR is fully resourced to make sure that they can maintain the level of service that we're getting from them, not on a human level, but on a systems level? Because, you know, globally systems have migrated to the cloud, to AI, et cetera, et cetera. The DFR needs to have the systems in place to ensure that they can match that sophistication in the marketplace. So that's my first big ask. And I've got 6 of them, I'm sorry to say, because my second one is could I ask as many of you as possible to come join us at one of our receptions or our sessions at our conference in August? We do great receptions. We've got a reception for the young professionals in the industry on the Sunday afternoon into the evening. On Monday, we have a welcome reception, which we're doing at Hula. We'll probably have about 900 people at that. Later on Monday, we do an LGBTQ reception. We're doing a big reception at the Hotel Vermont on Wednesday. We do a reception in our exhibit hall on Tuesday. Come meet the guys that you're providing the regulation for and see why they think this is so important to them. And the invite's there, and it's a free invite. Then another big ask that we've got is, I mentioned infrastructure and becoming Vermont's biggest bus company for 3 days. We perceive that there is a need to address what is called MICE business, M-I-C-E. It's an acronym. It stands for Meetings, Incentives, Conventions, and Expositions. And obviously, we are one of the largest events that comes to Vermont in the course of any year. But we believe that there is a market for what my friend at Hallow Burlington, the Visitors Bureau, calls the Monday to Thursday market. In other words, business tourism, those meetings, incentives, conventions, and expositions. And so we may need to have something along the lines of a feasibility study done to work out whether or not Vermont in general could support a more active move towards better infrastructure for that MICE business. And by better infrastructure, we mean improved hotel offerings, improved convention and meeting space offerings, and things along those lines. Because we believe that Vermont in general is leaving business on the table through a lack of that infrastructure. And we were just over with your colleagues in the Senate, and the chair of Senate Finance was reminding us that she tried to bring a meeting here of NCOIL, the National
It's an insurance legislator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And they couldn't fit. And so that's indicative of what's being left on the table. So that will require, and we've put together an ad hoc group, and Brittany Nevins from the DED is working with me in that group. We've also got people from the meeting and hospitality industry in Vermont involved in that, and we've got the executive director of Hallow Burlington involved in that. And we're looking at whether or not we can put together a proposal to do a feasibility study on what would the market be in Vermont in general and Burlington in particular, because that's where the transportation hub is. And that may need some funding, and there may be requests coming for that. The fourth one is the easy one, which is to continue your review of the legislation that surrounds the captive industry here in Vermont and making sure that it is still that world-class legislation that means that people do want to bring their captives here. The work of this committee in moving that forwards and ensuring that we're always up to date is absolutely critical. And part of the reason for that is, and it comes back to sort of what's tying this all together, is for better or worse, this is a very mobile industry. If I was sitting here from Ben and Jerry's and saying, oh, we're at risk, we could go elsewhere, you might sit there and go, yeah, how long is it going to take you to spin up a factory? And you may have noticed that the cows are all here, and things along those lines. But literally, the captives and the support industry for captives can move with 2 strokes of a pen. It's a human-based industry. They need business places to operate out of, but they could end one lease and start another lease. They could hire a person on an employment contract that is in Bangalore, India, not in Winooski, Vermont. And that's the danger, is that the mobility of our industry is beneficial from a responsiveness point of view of the industry, but it also means that we've got to work really, really hard to keep that industry here, because they have the ability to move with comparatively little barrier. So that's why we need that continued excellence that we have. So normally, Mr. Chairman, I'm here being all bright and sunny. So before I pass over to my colleague, Melinda, I wanted to see if there are any questions, Mr. Chair, that you had of me or any of your colleagues.
Questions for Catherine? Sure.
So thank you. Appreciate that. I appreciate the clear ask also. I'm curious about the staffing at DFR. We had a conversation with them the other day and it sounded like the department that regulates captives is relatively well staffed. And so I'm curious what you're seeing that makes you concerned, or is am I misremembering my?
It's absolutely not the people. It's my concern, it's industry's concern through me about support systems to enable those really smart people.
So we talked about that. Okay. So
So-
then I just didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. The industry has the world's greatest respect for the folks that are in the department. The concern is the support systems around them.
So digital infrastructure specifically.
To be honest with you, I think it goes right away from the top, from digital infrastructure down to sort of working environment. And in terms of things like, and it sounds silly, but it's something like, are people comfortable at their desks? Things like that. It's kind of like, when was the last time that workstations were upgraded and things like that? And if people are working from home, are they being provided with the ergonomically successful things that make them able to work? So I think it's not only the things saying, okay, we definitely need new systems. It's also addressing how comfortable are people sitting at their desks. I mean, it sounds like simple stuff, but those things, I think we all recognize, are critical to the effective disposition of a job. And so I think that all needs to be addressed and make sure that they've got the state of the art to enable them to support an industry that is also state of the art.
Thank you.
Anything else? Just to let you know, just before you came in, we were having a conversation with Burlington Airport. And they were briefing us on the expansion plans that they have in mind for the next few years, and
Right.
moving terminals back so they can accommodate larger jets coming in. Trying to entice more airlines to come in, putting in another terminal. There's a lot of things, a lot in planning that will help increase the availability of people coming into Burlington Airport.
And a reception center.
Yeah, because they're looking at putting, a one-day business people flying in, having their meeting flying out without staying overnight. So putting a center in there, the business center. So that's encouraging.
Yeah.
And I'm very open to hearing what comes out of this steering committee that you have of trying to increase the availability of motels and, more beds in the Burlington area, not just Burlington, South Burlington, in that whole area, and how can we better move people around? A really large convention center would be wonderful, but I think, is it the chicken or the egg? Which one came first?
Sure.
Trying to figure out, if we build it, will they come? So I think it's going to take some consulting work that'll need to be done, and I'm more than happy to try to push that with appropriations to get money for that, but certainly are open to those discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Kevin.
I'm going to pass you over to a more cheerful Melinda Young, if I may,
I
Mr.
can't
Chairman.
say that wasn't cheerful. I mean,
Yeah.
Is it okay to share a document?
welcome to Commerce.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I am Melinda Young. I am Vice President of Risk Management for Alberici Constructors. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and Alberici. I have been in the insurance industry a very long time. And if you're doing the math, I started when I was 12. Have been, prior to coming to Alberici in 2018, I was in an insurance broker capacity, mostly focused on the construction industry. And I have the honor of serving as a board member of the VCIA. A little bit about Alberici. We are a diversified construction company with operations throughout North America. We employ about 3,500 craft and salaried employees. We serve as a general contractor, design build contractor, and construction manager. We are headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. By the way, if you could get Burlington to get Southwest here on a direct flight, I would greatly appreciate that. We were founded in 1918 by John Alberici. His grandson is currently our chairman emeritus. We are very fortunate that John is very committed to the insurance industry and the captive industry. Our captive was his brainchild, so he is very proud and very committed to that. We have annual revenues of about 4 billion. Last year we had our largest year ever and are on track to do about the same or better in 2024. We serve a multitude of markets that you can see listed there: automotive, healthcare, energy and renewables, aviation, hospitality. We were ranked in 2023 as Engineering News-Record's 39th largest contractor. And a fun fact that we hired our first safety professional in 1962 and saw a 35% decrease in accidents, thus beginning our full commitment to safety, which is why our captive came along. We have currently 2 captives. Our main captive is here in Vermont, NC3. It's a subsidiary of our parent company, Alberici Corporation. It was established in 2000. Our MC3 is also a captive that we have that's based in Missouri. And really that is a captive that was established to avoid any confusion created by the Dodd-Frank legislation. But all the premium actually flows through that captive to our Vermont captive. So NC3 provides 100% reinsurance to MC3. Together, those 2 captives provide pretty much all of our insurance coverages to our corporation. As you can see listed there, these are our main core casualty coverages: general liability, auto liability, workers' compensation, and again, more listed there. Our NC3 captive also participates in a workers' compensation reinsurance pool. How it all started, we were invited many years ago to participate in a group captive that was a conglomeration of construction companies. We considered that, but eventually decided that we should just form our own captive. It gives us better financial flexibility. It also gave us the ability to write insurance coverages that weren't offered within the group captive. Cost savings was not our objective. We were really focused on safety and making sure our employees went home safely without injury. And this captive gave us the ability to manage that a little bit better. When we were looking at domiciles, we knew that we wanted a well-regulated onshore domicile that was important for us, for our domicile, to convey professionalism, credibility, and transparency. As my boss would say, to pass the red face test, right? We wanted it to be legit. After consideration, and we looked at various domiciles throughout the US, we certainly realized that Vermont was the gold standard when it came to captives. We chose our captive team, as you can see listed there. So all of our service providers are located here in Vermont, with the exception of our claims administrator, who's located in St. Louis with us. So why Vermont? So for all the obvious reasons listed there, and I'm sure you've heard all these before, but the captive resources and education here are second to none. I can tell you, as an insurance broker, I handled property and casualty insurance. I knew enough about captives to be dangerous and to pass them along to someone else. But I have learned so much from this community, particularly VCIA has been a huge part of my captive education. But the community here, to my second point, is so collaborative and really works together to support this industry. And it's such an important piece of the Vermont economy. The Vermont Captive Insurance Division of the DFR is very responsive. I was just sharing with Sandy earlier that we are going through an exam right now, and the staff there has been very supportive, very good to work with, very professional. The synergy, as I'm sure you've seen between DFR and DED, very impressive and effective. And of course, the support that all of you provide through legislation is really critical. And again, one of the reasons that we are here. And not to mention, as a side bonus, VCIA is the world's largest insurance trade association. We do see it as a beneficial partnership. We, as I mentioned, all of our premiums run through our Vermont captive. And as you can see there in 2023, we wrote about 25.3 million in premium. And last year, 23.7. So that's, I don't know what that equates to in tax dollars, honestly, but I'm sure it's a lot. We also pay professional management fees, again, to our service providers here in Vermont to the tune of about 600,000. We also hold our retreat here, as is required by the state legislation, spend about 25 to 30. We see that as a contribution to the economy of Vermont. And I will tell you, I had never been in Vermont prior to joining Alberici and becoming involved in the captive, but I've grown to love this state, love the people here. Everyone is so kind and generous, and just really enjoy being part of the community. So thank you very much for the opportunity. And again, thank you for your support of the captive industry.
Yeah. Any questions from Melinda? Yeah.
That was interesting. The last point you made about, I guess, a requirement of the industry you have, or of the state regulation to have something take place each year in the state.
Yeah, so we're required to have our annual board meeting physically here in the state once a year.
And does that need to be 3 days? Is there a length of time that it has to be, or is that?
No, it's just a meeting. We choose, that is our personal preference, to come here. We typically bring our spouses and we spend the weekend. I mean, we figure if we're traveling that far, might as well take, and of course, this will not come as a surprise. We do come here in the fall. Because it is beautiful here in the fall. So yeah, we enjoy a long weekend, but that is not a requirement.
Questions? Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you. Remember for me. Sure, thank you.
Good to see you all again. For the record, Sandy Bigglestone, Acting Commissioner of Department of Financial Regulation and Deputy Commissioner of the Captive Insurance Division. I think we did a pretty good job. I didn't bring a presentation. I have some notes in front of me, but happy to address any thoughts that you took away from the DFR's overview last week. And, I just appreciate your time once again. And we're here celebrating VCI Legislative Day, and all of that entails. I think it's important for you to hear from industry and some concerns or both challenges and wins that they've had along their paths. And, there's a lot of talk about Vermont as, we're number one globally. That is a wonderful thing, right? We're all sort of celebrating that. We have been for the past few years. Ever since I've been in captive insurance regulation, in my 28th year now, we've always been number one in the US in terms of domiciles. There were a lot less US domiciles back then. And we had about 300 captives at the time that we were regulating. And we're up to almost 700 now. But while it's a wonderful thing to be number one, my role is to make sure that we uphold the highest regulatory standard, so that the companies that choose to come here can place their trust and confidence that we're doing our job, and we're doing our job well, And we're protecting the investment that they're making in themselves to manage their risk through their captive insurance operations. And so I probably shouldn't put this on record, but if we don't stay number one, I think we're still going to have a quality domicile that companies will choose to come here. What we quickly discovered years ago is that the methods that we employ to regulate our companies that choose to come here, and the legislation and regulations that we have are world-class quality. And you also heard that there's lots of domiciles that look to mimic us. But what we discovered was that if we continue to uphold a quality standard for regulation and collaborate and listen to our industry partners, listen to our government leaders and lawmakers about what's important to them, that we can continue to be successful in having that stable regulatory environment and having stable political environment here in Vermont has been very attractive for companies to come here. And they want to be regulated with high standards and quality standards because it creates accountability back to their C-suites. So I just wanted to underscore that for you. My other focus is our people within DFR to make sure that we're designed to be attractive to bringing in more talent, new talent, outreach to colleges, hopefully high schools, to make them aware of this great industry in Vermont, that there's lots of career avenues, whether they come into captive regulation or not. I'm fine with that, but my focus is on our people to make sure that they continue to develop professionally, that they understand how important this industry is, and that they feel rewarded for working in it and doing great. Just like you heard from Melinda, I hear so many times over the past several years the caliber and the quality of our staff when they're engaged with analysis and examination work with our regulated companies, and how much they're appreciated for their knowledge, their professionalism, and their expertise in doing what they're doing. I think it adds value, and I'd like to see that continue. So that's a little bit of my role and what I would like to see happen going forward. Happy to take any questions.
Kevin raised an industry concern with the comfort and state of mind, all those kinds of things that make a successful and happy and well humming along workplace. Has there been any assessments to see if there may be some issues, or have you heard anything from rank and file that they need a new chair or whatever it may be?
Mm-hmm. Great question. To answer that, we're always assessing things that we can do to improve upon our regulations. We come to you every year with a piece of legislation to improve upon that. But internally, our processes and procedures, we want to be the best that we can be at what we do. So we're always assessing the tools that we have to carry out our duties as captive insurance regulators. And we're always projecting, I think I had testified last week that we're projecting our needs based on our most recent growth and projecting if we're going to need more staff to keep up with that growth. But along with that, what we have been wishing and hoping for several years now is better technology is one of my priorities. We do okay with the systems that we have, and we're pretty much automated, I would say, but those automated systems are sort of falling behind the times. And while we have great tools, we spend a lot of administrative time working with those tools. And so my assessment resulted in, and my team's assessment, wasn't just me, resulted in the fact that if we spent less administrative time using the systems that we have to continue doing what we do, that would be, if we had better systems, more upgraded technology, advanced technology that could augment and complement our work, the time that we're spending administratively could be spent doing much better things. And advancing, doing more outreach or participating in education, or just thinking of other ways in which, things evolve in financial regulation, and being able to stay on top of that and evolve with it takes time.
Perhaps even improving response times to existing.
Oh, absolutely. The more companies we have, the more demands on our time. So I can tell you 50 to about 100 filings for business plan changes a week we process. We're doing examinations, we're doing ongoing analysis. The last year, our average past 5 years, sorry, our average examinations that we perform on an annual basis is 107. Starting next year and forward, the projection is 125 examinations a year. So our technology tools need to stay updated in order to continue doing our work at the pace that we do it. There is no waste or abuse in the captive insurance division within the DFR, I guarantee. We work very hard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Sorry, we
Yes.
need to hear from Brittany. We will bring, the DFR bill is going to be coming back to us.
And you can ask me all the questions then.
We'll be digging into that, and we can have that conversation with the internal commission as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, committee, thank you for having me. My name is Brittany Nevins, and I am the Captive Insurance Economic Development Director with the state of Vermont. And I am in the Department of Economic Development. So I am a team of one responsible in the department for marketing the captive insurance industry and recruiting businesses to license their captive insurance company in Vermont. And Hazel is helping pull up the presentation. Thank you. It's my understanding you have a hard stop at 3, right?
Even before.
Okay. Well, my time is cut a little short, a blessing and a curse of being last, but I'll just kind of fly through it a bit and glaze over things, I guess is the expression. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out at any point. I think my presentation will summarize a lot of what we've talked about already. So the main highlights of 2024, it was a really great year for Vermont. We virtually won every award possible, which might be the first time in our history that we have ever done that. So Domicile of the Year, International Domicile of the Year, Director of Captive Insurance, Christine Brown, who's in the room, and Commissioner Sandy Bigglestone. They were selected for a prestigious award for women in captive insurance, and Sandy was voted the top captive insurance professional in the world this past year. So yes. Very big year. Just to give a sense of our global reach, we are continuing to license international companies with US risk. We have over 80 companies now with international ownership in 23 different countries. We've spoken regularly on panels at the European Captive Forum. So folks are recognizing that Vermont is a thought leader in this industry, and they want to have us be speaking more often globally. Sandy and I will be in London in a couple of weeks for the UK Captive Summit, where they have asked her to speak at that event. And the International Domicile of the Year Award was actually our third year in a row of winning that award. So we attended in the last year at least 24 different events. Vermont staff spoke at least 28 different times. So that tells you that multiple staff are being asked within the state to speak at different events. So at a given conference, there may be 3 of us speaking at that conference. Of those events that we attended, they were located in 15 different states and 2 different countries were represented. So I'm just going to pull up my notes a little bit. So this is where math is not really my friend, and I don't want to speak incorrectly on anything. But in a nutshell, you can look at this more closely later, but particularly the premium tax revenue graph on the right-hand side, which is in yellow, that represents the premium tax revenue coming into the state every year. So you can see there it has been a steady increase year after year. It is about, the captive insurance program has generated about $671 million since captive enabling legislation in 1981. So this is ongoing revenue and really represents our success, and a big reason why Vermont is supporting this industry so strongly is because of this economic impact. So I recently got into, I put out a request of our service providers in the industry to ask for some of their job data. And so I asked them how many Vermont resident employees did they have in 2020 compared to 2025? And how many total employees conducting Vermont business did they have in 2020 and 2025? So you can see here the yellow on the left-hand side, from 2020 to 2025, the number of jobs that were held by Vermont residents actually decreased by 6 so far. And I have about half of the respondents I was expecting. On the right-hand side, you can see the total employees conducting business has grown significantly from 2020 to 2025. So it's clear that the Vermont captive industry is growing, and the access to talent here is not meeting that growth, and that's putting a strain on the captive insurance service providers. So this is, we've heard, lots of anecdotal information, which I'm happy to share around accounting and CPAs. Does the bell mean you have to go? Okay. Got it. In a nutshell, 60% of the captive insurance jobs that are available are going to people out of the state. So this is data you saw from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development last week that supports this as well. But in a nutshell, we're doing as best as we possibly can as an industry. We're growing tremendously. And there is a big gap in the workforce side of things, but also an opportunity. These are jobs that pay $92,000 a year. These are potential taxpayers, people that would be really supporting the economy. So as much support as you can is appreciated. You know, we always say housing is economic development. And so any support you can do around affordability is going to help tackle this challenge. So I will leave it at that. You can look at some of the specific initiatives we're doing in the industry around workforce on a future slide. And my contact info is there as well. So definitely appreciate all the support you can give toward a potential conference center, to the airport, and affordability in Vermont.
Brittany, thank you. I'm sorry we have to cut you short today. We will bring you back again, have probably a little bit deeper discussion with you. So the committee gets a better flavor of what you do for captive industry.
Great.
Again, thank you, Kevin, Melinda, thank you for coming in today. DFR, thank you for all you do in the agency. So committee, on the floor, there will be a short break and we're back at 3:45 on the floor for the caucus of the whole. Again, not mandatory, but highly suggested